respond.
It's a fabulous presentation. I think all the audience learned much from the narrative recounting the National Security Administration's beginning. I guess one of the things that James omitted, it was created by a top secret memorandum by Harry Truman in 1952. There wasn't any congressional debate, there was no public debate, it just sort of emerged like a pea from Zeus's head. But I'm sure that Harry Truman thought would be embarrassed by a discussion.
Well, that's true, yeah. As Bruce was saying, yeah, it's the only agency in the U.S. government that wasn't created by a law in Congress. It wasn't created by hearings. It wasn't created by bill through Congress. It was created by a top secret memorandum signed by Harry Truman in 1952. That was even the Congress wasn't allowed to know about it. So it's the only agency in the U.S. government that was born secret.
Yeah, which is, of course, the opposite of our postulates is that government must be transparent in order to have government by the consent of the government. But it seemed very apparent and conspicuous to me that other than a few cameo appearances, really nothing in your narrative, Jim, involved Congress. We have the whistleblower. But where's Congress? I mean, Article 1.
Well, at least not since 1975.
And so, yeah, and that was just sort of an episodic instance in any event. And we're talking about, as John Henry said, the Constitution of the United States. Article 1, Section 6. Specifically endows all members with what's called speech or debate immunity. It was exercised by Mike Gravel in the Pentagon Papers, and he read 47 classified volumes of the Pentagon Papers into the record. He was investigated for Espionage Act by the Nixon administration. He claimed...
I think I know where you're getting. Go right ahead.
In any event...
I know the punchline here.
But the reason for these observations are we can't depend upon our liberties that some brave whistleblowers from time to time will expose the wrongdoing of the executive branch. It needs to be institutionalized, which is the whole reason why you have congressional oversight and the speech or debate clause. And until that's changed, we may get Snowden's from time to time, but it isn't going to change the dynamic unless there's a systematic insistence by the American people in Congress that this be made public. I don't see any of that generation. Now, you ask for another church committee, Dianne Feinstein or Mike Rogers.
Yes.
I mean, it is a joke. If anything, they help the cover up. And just to show...
Well, that's what, yeah, exactly. And that was one of the points I usually make, and I should have made it here, was that I'm not asking for a church committee in Congress. I'm asking for a external church committee, a committee that would be like a 9/11 commission, and also one that just doesn't have former government officials on it, one that has a civil libertarian, a journalist, and so forth. But anyway, we got to get other questions too, Bruce. Thanks.
That was my question, which was, who is the Frank Church of 2014?
Yeah, that was why unless we could find somebody with the medical ability to bring him back to life and put him back into the Senate, I wouldn't put the Senate, I wouldn't allow the Senate or the Congress to do this committee. Because look where, as Bruce was saying, I mean, look where they've come so far. You know, when I've been following this ever since the church committee, with the church committee. They took it upon themselves, their mission, at least the way they looked at it, was they were the buffer between the American public and the NSA, or the intelligence community. And it's revolved now so that the intelligence committees in Congress feel that they're the protector of the agencies, not the protector of the public. They argue for a bigger budget for the intelligence agencies whenever there's a cut in the budget, or they argue for more freedoms for the agencies. And where were they during the 2.5 years until the Times released the, let the information get out about the warrantless eavesdropping, which came from whistleblower, not from our overseers in Congress. Yes, any other questions? Oh, yeah, sorry. Oh, Deborah, Deborah Boardman is a really good friend of mine. She was the lead attorney on the Tom Drake case, and I worked on that case, and it was a tremendously successful case. Tom Drake was a whistleblower from NSA who was charged with 5 counts of espionage for leaking some rather mundane information. I was able to show, with the help of Debbie that the information they were charging with was not only unclassified. They wanted to put him in jail for 35 years. It was not only unclassified, but it was in the public domain and put there by the NSA and the Pentagon. So when it came time for the trial, the prosecution threw the case out and asked them to please just sign this thing agreeing to a misdemeanor with no jail time and no fine. And the judge spent 20 minutes yelling at the prosecutor and the NSA. So it was a really good case. I appreciated Debbie's work on that.
So, hi Jim, it's good to see you. Thank you for that.
For embarrassing you, I appreciate it. Yeah.
Slightly, and I'm actually going to take a different role, play devil's advocate a bit, which is driven actually in part by this uncomfortability, this uncomfortable feeling that I have with Edward Snowden actually. And it's driven in large part by my experience in Tom's case, which is, I've read articles in the Post and the Times that there are millions of documents, well, I guess 1.7 million documents that he took, only a small snippet of which we've seen, and the vast majority of the documents that are in Greenwald's possession, and I presume you saw, have really nothing to do with metadata or spying on Americans. And in fact, one of the slides you showed was a map of the world showing where our malware is. And I don't want to comment on whether we need to know about that, but at what point is Edward Snowden going to be not this glamorous hero, but a thief?
Talk to the journalists. Snowden doesn't have the documents.
Well, no, let me just say, that's a good question because that's one of the major questions that people have. I mean, the question is, you got 1.7 million documents, we've only seen a little bit. And by the way, Snowden didn't show me all these documents. I was down there, he happened to show me just a couple. Yeah, that's a really good question. What happens to it? I mean, the major questions are, could the Chinese have gotten access to it? Could the Russians have gotten access to it? According to what Snowden says, they didn't get access to it. I mean, speaking in Snowden's defense to some degree, if you're a whistleblower and you're trying to get the documents out, and you don't have time to sort of edit those documents while you're sitting there at your desk at NSA. So the idea was you would pull the documents out, and not just sort of put them up on the internet, but to give them to responsible journalists, and the journalists would go through them. That's what happened with Dan Ellsberg, who's actually a good friend of mine, and he did that. He gave it to the New York Times and the Washington Post, and we ended up helping to shorten a war that we should never have gotten into. So, yeah, there's no perfect situation. I don't think he went to whistleblower school. He probably didn't, read how to be whistleblowers for dummies or whatever. I give him a lot of courage for a lot of credit for the courage that he had when he did. I think there's a lot that the government is always saying that, the world's going to come to an end. They said the world was going to come to an end when Yardley wrote The Black Chamber. They said the world was going to come to an end when David Kahn wrote The Code Breakers. They said the world was going to come to an end when I wrote The Puddle Palace. They said the world's going to come to an end every time I write something. But so far the world's still pretty good shape, and the main problems we have is getting into wars that we're not supposed to be in. So we don't have whistleblowers occasionally, who may not be perfect people, may make mistakes. Then we're going to have these more wars, and we're going to have more government that we don't want and that we don't know about. So anyway, I'm always happy to debate you, Debbie. You're such a great lawyer. I always feel that I'm up against the greatest challenge, so I appreciate it. Thanks for the question.
Yep, right here.
Oh, yes.
Hi, thanks, Jim. Jeff Steinberg. I wanted to pick up and follow a bit further on the Al-Midar and Hazmi business, because you probably know that part of this is the subject of a 28-page section of the original joint congressional investigation into 9/11 that was suppressed by President Bush and remained suppressed by President Obama. This section, from what we can derive from other writings and speeches by Senator Bob Graham, who chaired that committee, indicated a line of investigation on Saudi intelligence connections with the two hijackers in San Diego, funding mechanisms, and apparently also the fact that the FBI refused to allow the congressional committee investigators access to the informant who owned the house where these two guys were staying. Maybe you could say more about it.
On 9/11, so, but just give me the predicate of your question.
Just further comment, two members of Congress have introduced a bill, Walter Jones and Steve Lynch, calling for every member to read the 28 pages and have it declassified. I wonder what your thoughts are on that dimension of this.
Well, I completely agree, and I actually have a lot of admiration for Walter Jones. Walter Jones, a Republican from North Carolina, and he was the person who put a bill in when we went to war in Iraq to change the name of French fries to Freedom Fries because the French weren't supporting our war. And then one day he read the book I wrote on Iraq called A Pretext for War, and he completely changed and became one of the most vocal anti-war opponents within Congress. So I've always had a great deal of admiration for him for admitting a mistake and then trying to get others to change also. Yeah, those parts, it's amazing what's still classified in those reports. I have no idea what it says. I haven't seen anybody leak it to me. I don't know what the Saudi part is. There's a lot of people that have speculated what the Saudi part is. So I don't know. But there's the committee did a very poor job on the NSA aspect, which I wrote a lot about because they never focused on what the NSA knew and what they didn't know and so forth. And I agree with you that that should be released as soon as possible.